Emma, what is the latest, given that we have seen efforts in terms of the closed-loop systems to be able to minimise the impact of COVID-0 on production? We have, of course, heard from Apple that shipments will be affected.
Yeah, I mean, the iPhone factory run by the Taiwanese company Foxconn in that central city of Zhengzhou will basically remain under the restrictions that it's been under for the past week when it was in this area that was locked down. It was pretty interesting how they announced this yesterday. There was much fanfare about the lockdown in the airport area of Zhengzhou being lifted, but tucked into the statement were a bunch of high-risk areas, so areas that will continue to basically enforce lockdown-like restrictions. And iPhone City, as it's known, is in one of those high-risk areas. So it will continue to very likely see production snags, issues with getting supplies in and out. Particularly when you've got lockdowns still in place in many parts of Zhengzhou. They are continuing to run a closed loop at the factory. That means that workers are basically confined to the compound, can go to and from their dorms to the production lines. But lockdowns do raise this issue. We saw it in Shanghai, for example, of disrupted supply chains, of trucks and trains and other modes of transport not being able to operate the way they normally would to bring in the materials needed to make these devices.
It's really incredible from somebody that's looking at what's happening inside China to continue seeing these renewed lockdowns after, more than 2 years since the pandemic first started. Does this mean that we could see more restrictions? And what's been the reaction on the ground, especially when it comes to the public?
Yeah, I mean, we're almost 3 years into this, and China did have that honeymoon period at the start of the pandemic once the Wuhan outbreak was brought under control, where they were able to keep COVID quite effectively out and live, pretty normal lives. But the oncoming of the more transmissible Omicron variant has meant that it's become pretty impossible to keep COVID out of China, but they are still persisting with this COVID-0 policy of trying to eliminate cases. And yes, we are continuing to see lockdowns. There have been orders from Beijing to minimize the disruption of COVID-0 policies and restrictions, but then you get situations like Guangzhou where they've been reluctant to impose wider lockdowns, but cases have surged, almost sixfold there over the past week. With spread amid the community. And that is leading to them having to rack up restrictions over the past day or so, 2 more lockdowns in districts there, and much of the city students told to school from home for the next few days.